My family's charity gala sparkled with promise until my daughter grabbed my arm and whispered, "We have to leave right now." When I demanded why, she said, "I'll explain in the car." As we sped away, the silence heavy with dread, she finally turned to me and said, "You didn't see what they were planning, did you?" The true motive behind the night was the champagne flute glinted under the chandelier's golden glow, bubbles rising like whispered secrets in a room full of them. I, Claire Reynolds, stood at the edge of the Emerald Bay Country Club's grand ballroom, my navy silk gown clinging to my frame as I forced a smile for the Seattle elite swirling around me. Tech titans, venture capitalists, and media hounds had gathered to celebrate my parents' 45th anniversary, a milestone that screamed legacy in a city obsessed with innovation. But as I reached for the glass, a waiter pressed toward me, my 17-year-old daughter Ava seized my wrist with a grip that could have cracked bone. "Mom, don't drink it," she hissed, her emerald eyes wild with panic. "They're trying to kill you. We need to leave now." The world tilted. The string quartet's melody warped into a dissonant hum. Ava's words "kill you" slammed into me like a freight train, but I couldn't process them. Not here. Not in this glittering cage of crystal and ambition, where every smile was a transaction and every toast a power play. My daughter's face, pale beneath her sapphire gown, held no trace of her usual teenage defiance. This was fear, raw and unfiltered, and it clawed at my chest. "Ava, what are you talking about?" I whispered, my voice barely audible over the clinking glasses and laughter. "This is Grandma and Grandpa's party. Nobody's trying to—" "Mom, please," she cut in, her voice low but urgent. "I saw the waiter swap your glass with one from his tray. It's not safe. Trust me." I glanced at the flute, now resting on a passing server's tray, its contents catching the light like liquid diamonds. Poison? The idea was absurd, a plot ripped from a thriller, not my life as a tech executive at Pinnacle Innovations, the company my parents, Edward and Victoria Hamilton, had built into a Seattle empire. But Ava's trembling hand on mine, her nails digging into my skin, told a different story. My daughter, always too perceptive for her own good, wasn't prone to hysterics. If she said danger, I had to listen. "All right," I said, my throat tight, "but we can't just run out. Noah's with your grandparents, and I need to—" "Noah's fine for now," Ava interrupted, glancing toward the head table where my 10-year-old son sat, giggling as my father ruffled his hair. "But you're not, Mom. I've been watching them all night. Grandpa, Grandma, Dad, they're planning something. I heard things. Please, let's go." The mention of my ex-husband, James Carver, sent a jolt through me. James, the charismatic CFO I'd married at my father's urging, the man who'd betrayed me with his assistant, Lila Monroe, and left me scrambling after a divorce that gutted my finances. He was here, mingling with my parents' inner circle, his tailored suit and easy grin a stark contrast to the wreckage he'd left behind. Why was he even invited? And why was Ava, who'd barely spoken to him since the divorce, so certain he was part of some conspiracy? I scanned the ballroom, its opulence now suffocating. White roses cascaded from every table, their scent cloying. The chandeliers cast shadows that danced like specters across the faces of Seattle's power players. My mother, Victoria, radiant in a silver gown, air-kissed a venture capitalist. My father, Edward, his tuxedo impeccable, clapped a tech mogul on the back. And James, with Layla on his arm, her crimson dress, a deliberate taunt charmed a reporter. From TechCrunch. Everything looked perfect, curated, just as my parents liked it. But Ava's warning gnawed at me, a splinter I couldn't ignore. "Okay," I said, forcing calm into my voice. "Let's get Noah and slip out quietly. But you need to tell me everything once we're in the car." Ava nodded, her shoulders relaxing a fraction. I set the champagne flute on a nearby table, my fingers trembling as I did. The room felt like a minefield now, every glance a potential detonation. I wove through the crowd, nodding at familiar faces, board members, investors, my parents' country club friends, while Ava trailed close behind. My heels clicked against the marble floor, each step a countdown to escape, but escape wasn't that simple. As we neared the head table, my mother's voice sliced through the hum of conversation. "Claire, darling, where are you off to?" The toasts haven't even started. I froze, turning to face her. Victoria's smile was a masterpiece of control, her blue eyes sharp as cut glass. At 68, she was still a force, her blonde hair swept into an elegant chignon, her presence commanding the room like a queen holding court. But there was something off in her gaze, a flicker of calculation that made my skin prickle. "Mom, Ava's not feeling well," I lied, my voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through me. "I'm just going to take her home and come back." "Nonsense," Victoria said, her smile tightening. "Send Ava with your brother. Daniel can drive her. You and Noah need to stay. Your father has important announcements tonight." The word announcements landed like a stone in my stomach. Edward had been hinting at a new era for Pinnacle Innovations all week, but I'd assumed it was just corporate posturing, a way to keep investors buzzing. Now, with Ava's warning and my mother's insistence, it felt like something else, entirely something aimed at me. "I'd rather not split us up," I said, glancing at Noah, who was now showing my father a magic trick with a napkin. "It's a quick drive. I'll be back before the cake." Victoria's eyes narrowed, but before she could press further, a low rumble echoed through the ballroom. The floor vibrated beneath my feet, and a collective gasp rose from the guests. I spun toward the sound, my heart lurching as I realized it was coming from the private elevator near the VIP lounge, the one I'd used to access the Gala's planning suite earlier. "Stay here," I told Ava, but she grabbed my arm, her face ashen. "Mom, that's the elevator you were supposed to take after the toast," she whispered. "I heard Dad tell someone to make sure it's ready. I think it's rigged." My blood ran cold. The elevator had been fine when I'd used it an hour ago, its sleek interior a symbol of the club's exclusivity. But now the doors were jammed shut, and a faint grinding noise suggested something catastrophic. Guests murmured, some pulling out phones to record, while staff rushed toward the scene. I caught a glimpse of James near the lounge, his expression unreadable as he whispered to Lila, "We need to go," Ava urged, tugging me toward Noah. "Now," I nodded, my mind racing. Poisoned champagne, a sabotage elevator, were these accidents? Or was Ava right? Was someone, maybe my own family, trying to erase me from the picture? I hurried to the head table, where Edward was now standing, his authoritative presence calming the crowd. "Claire, what's this about?" he demanded as I reached for Noah's hand. His gray eyes, so like mine, held a mix of irritation and something darker, disapproval maybe, or warning. "Noah, let's go," I said, ignoring my father. My son looked confused, his brown curls bouncing as he clutched a party favor. "But Grandpa said there's a surprise later." "We'll come back for it," I promised, my voice tight. "Ava needs us." Edward stepped closer, his voice low. "This is highly inappropriate, Claire. We have investors watching. You can't just walk out." "I'm not debating this, Dad," I snapped, surprising myself with the edge in my tone. "We're leaving." His jaw tightened, but before he could argue, a sharp crack echoed from the elevator shaft, followed by a scream. The crowd surged toward the noise, and in the chaos, I pulled Noah to my side, Ava leading the way to the exit. My mother called after us, her voice sharp, but I didn't look back. The weight of her gaze, my father's disapproval, and James's Presence burned into me as we pushed through the ornate double doors into the cool Seattle night. The valet stand was a blur of activity, but our car, a modest Audi, a far cry from the Bentley I'd driven during my marriage, was already waiting. Thanks to Ava's foresight, she texted the valet during the elevator commotion, a move that now felt like a lifeline. We piled in, Noah in the back, Ava beside me, and I peeled out of the circular driveway, the tires screeching against the pavement. The city lights blurred past as I gripped the wheel, my heart pounding. Ava, start talking, I said, glancing at her. What's going on? Poison? The elevator? You said you heard Dad. What did you hear? Ava took a shaky breath, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. I've been suspicious for weeks, Mom. Grandpa and Grandma have been too nice, too focused on Noah, too dismissive of you. And Dad, he's been meeting with them, even after. The divorce. Tonight, I saw him slip something to the waiter who gave you that glass. And I overheard him and Grandpa in the lounge, talking about removing obstacles and securing Pinnacle. They mentioned your name, Mom. They said, you're unstable, that they need to take control before you ruin everything. Her words hit like a slap. Unstable? Me, the woman who clawed her way to a VP role at Pinnacle despite a divorce that left me with a fraction of my former wealth. The woman who'd balanced board meetings with Noah's soccer games and Ava's debate tournaments. I wanted to laugh, to dismiss it as absurd, but the memory of that champagne flute, the elevator's groan, stopped me cold. Ava, that's extreme, I said, my voice wavering. They're my parents. James is a snake, sure, but Mom and Dad, they wouldn't hurt me, would they? They already have, Ava said quietly. Think about it, Mom, the way they pushed you to marry Dad, how they sided with him during the divorce, how they're grooming Noah to be their little heir. And those documents I found. Documents? I interrupted, swerving slightly as I glanced at her. What documents? Ava hesitated, then pulled her phone from her clutch. Last week, when we were at their house for dinner, I needed a quiet place to study. Grandma told me to use Grandpa's office. His desk was a mess, papers everywhere, some with your name. I wasn't snooping, I swear, but I saw stuff. Contracts, share transfers, custody petitions for Noah. There were red flags, literal sticky. Notes marking sections about reallocating assets and protecting the Hamilton legacy. I took pictures. My stomach churned. You went through your grandfather's private files. I had to, Ava said, her voice fierce. You weren't listening, Mom. You kept saying they were trying to help, but they're not. They're planning to take everything, your shares, your role at Pinnacle, maybe even Noah. And tonight, I think they escalated. I wanted to argue, to cling to the belief that my parents, flawed as they were, loved me in their own way. Edward and Victoria had built Pinnacle from a garage startup into a tech giant. Their ambition matched only by their obsession with legacy. Growing up, I'd been their golden child, molded to carry the Hamilton name until I wasn't, until I chose art school over an MBA, until I questioned James's financial decisions, until I divorced the man they'd handpicked. Had I become a liability, as Ava said, a problem to be solved? The road ahead darkened as we left downtown Seattle, the Space Needle's glow fading in the rearview mirror. Noah's soft snores from the back seat were a small comfort, a reminder of what I was fighting for. But as I pressed the accelerator, the car lurched, the steering sluggish. A cold sweat broke out on my neck as I tested the brakes, nothing. The pedal sank to the floor, useless. Ava, hold on, I shouted, yanking the wheel to avoid an oncoming truck. The Audi swerved, tires screaming, and I managed to guide it into a ditch on the side of the highway. We jolted to a stop, the impact rattling my teeth, but we were alive. Oh my God, Ava gasped, her voice trembling. Mom, the brakes sabotaged, I finished, my hands shaking as I unbuckled my seatbelt. Someone cut the lines. Noah stared, blinking sleepily. Mom, what happened? Just a little car trouble, buddy, I said, forcing a smile. Stay put, okay? Ava and I exchanged a look, her fear mirroring mine. First the champagne, then the elevator, now this. 3 strikes in one night, each more brazen than the last. My parents, James, maybe others, they weren't just plotting. They were acting, and we were running out of time. I pulled out my phone, my fingers hovering over 911, but Ava stopped me. No police, not yet. We don't know who they've bought. Grandpa has connections everywhere, cops, judges, you name it. We need to be smart. She was right. Edward's influence stretched across Seattle like a spider web. His donations to political campaigns and police charities a matter of public record. If this was a conspiracy, we couldn't trust the usual channels. But we couldn't stay here, exposed on a dark highway either. Ava, those documents, I said, my voice steadier now. Show me. She opened her phone, scrolling through photos of legal papers, each one a dagger to my heart. Share transfer forms with my name crossed. Al and James's written in. A custody petition claiming I was unfit due to emotional instability. A memo in my father's precise handwriting outlining a plan to neutralize Claire's influence at Pinnacle. The words blurred as tears stung my eyes, but I forced myself to focus. There's more, Ava said, her voice barely above. A whisper. I've been talking to Anna Wayne. I froze. Elaine Hamilton, my father's younger sister, was a family ghost story, a brilliant engineer who'd helped launch Pinnacle, only to be exiled after a falling out with Edward. My parents had painted her as unstable, a cautionary tale of greed and betrayal. I hadn't spoken to her in 20 years, not since I was a teenager dazzled by my father's vision. How? I asked, my voice hoarse. When? 3 months ago, Ava admitted. I found her on LinkedIn. I reached out because the way Grandpa treats you reminded me of what he did to her. She's been warning me, Mom. She said Grandpa's done this before, used corporate power to crush anyone who defies him. She thinks he's planning to do it to you. The weight of her words settled over me like a shroud. Elaine, the aunt I'd been taught to forget, had seen this coming. And Ava, my fierce, brilliant daughter, had pieced it together while I'd been blind, too busy chasing my parents' approval to notice the noose tightening around me. We need to get somewhere safe, I said, restarting the car. The engine sputtered that held. Then we figure out our next move. As we pulled back onto the highway, the Seattle skyline a distant promise, I felt a shift inside me. The Claire who'd spent years pleasing Edward and Victoria, who'd married. James to secure her place was crumbling. In her place was someone new, someone who'd fight, not just for her children, but for the truth. Ava's hand found mine, her grip steady despite the fear in her eyes. They underestimated us, she said, a hint of defiance breaking through. They did, I agreed, my voice hardening. And that's their first mistake. The road stretched. Ahead, dark and uncertain, but one thing was clear. The gala was just the beginning. My family had drawn a line, and I was ready to cross it, no matter the cost. The night air was thick with the scent of pine and asphalt as we drove toward my apartment in Capitol Hill. The city's eclectic heartbeat, a faint comfort against the chaos in my mind. I kept one eye on the rearview mirror, half expecting headlights to tail us, but the road stayed empty. Noah had fallen back asleep, his party favor a glow-in-the-dark keychain clutched in his small hand. Ava sat rigid, her phone glowing as she scrolled through more photos, her silence louder than any words. I wanted to ask 1,000 questions about Elaine, the documents, what else she'd overheard, but my thoughts kept circling back to the gala. The way my mother had dismissed my concerns, the way my father had positioned Noah as his heir, the way James had moved through the crowd like he still owned me. And that champagne flute, its bubbles now a symbol of something far uglier than celebration. Mom, pull over, Ava said suddenly, her voice sharp. I need to show you something else. I found a deserted strip mall, its neon signs flickering in the dark, and parked under a street lamp. The light cast harsh shadows across Ava's face, making her look older, harder. She handed me her phone, a video queued up. I recorded this during the gala when you were talking to Aunt Margaret. Margaret, my mother's sister, had always been the soft-spoken one, the aunt who sent thoughtful Christmas cards but avoided family drama. Tonight, she'd pulled me aside near the dessert table, her nervous glances setting my nerves on edge. Claire, be careful, she'd whispered. I overheard Edward and James talking about transferring your shares. They're forging something your signature, I think. I'd brushed it off, assuming she'd misheard, but Ava's video told a different story. The footage was shaky, captured from a corner of the ballroom, but the voices were unmistakable. Edward and James, standing near the VIP lounge, their heads bent close. She's too emotional. James, my father said, his tone clipped. Always. Has been. The board won't trust her after the divorce. We need someone stable to lead Pinnacle. Agreed, James replied, his voice smooth as whiskey. Lila's already drafting the press release. Once we push the embezzlement angle, Claire's out. Noah's the perfect symbol, young, moldable, a Hamilton heir. And Ava? Edward asked, a note of disdain in his voice. James laughed. Low and cruel. Too much like her mother. We'll sideline her. Maybe a boarding school, keep her out of the way. The video cut off, but the words echoed in my skull, each one a fresh wound. Embezzlement, forged signatures. Boarding school, FOR Ava. My parents and James weren't just plotting to take my shares. They were writing my life, my children's lives, to fit their vision of Pinnacle's future. And Noah, my sweet, sensitive boy, was their pawn. I handed the phone back to Ava, my hand shaking. How long have you known? Weeks, she admitted, her voice small. I didn't want to scare you until I had proof. That's why I contacted Anna Lane. She's been through this, Mom. Grandpa ruined her, took her shares, her career, everything. She said he'll do whatever it takes to keep control, even if it means... She trailed off, but the unspoken words hung heavy, even if it means hurting. You. I leaned back against the headrest, the weight of betrayal crushing me. My parents had always been demanding, their love a currency earned through compliance. As a child, I'd memorized their rules, straight A's, perfect manners, no room for failure. When I rebelled choosing art over business, dating a musician, in college, they'd tighten their grip, steering me toward James, the son-in-law who'd fit their mold. For 12 years, I'd played the part, believing my loyalty would earn their respect. But now, with Ava's evidence and the night's near misses, I saw the truth. I was expendable, a means to an end, and my children were collateral. We need a plan, I said, forcing my voice to steady. Somewhere safe to regroup, someone we can trust. Elaine, Ava said immediately. She's in Portland now, running her own consultancy. She offered to help if things got bad. And they're bad, Mom. Portland was a 3-hour drive, a risk with a car that might be compromised, but staying. And Seattle felt like walking into a trap. Edward's influence was everywhere, boardrooms, law firms, even the mayor's office. If he was bold enough to sabotage an elevator, poison a drink, cut brake lines, what was next? A staged accident? A psychiatric hold, like Ava's recording suggested? Okay, I said. We'll head to Portland, but first we need to secure those documents. If they're as damning as you say, they're our leverage. Ava nodded, but her eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. Mom, headlights. I turned, my pulse spiking. A black CUV idled at the edge of the parking lot, its tinted windows impenetrable. It hadn't been there when we pulled in, and its sudden appearance felt like a predator's stare. I started the car, the engine coughing but catching, and eased onto the road, watching the SUV in the mirror. It followed, keeping a steady distance, its presence a silent threat. Don't panic, I said, more to myself than Ava. Could be a coincidence. It's not, she said, her voice flat. They know we're onto them. I pressed the accelerator, weaving through Capitol Hill's narrow streets, the SUV matching my every turn. My mind raced for options: call the police and risk Edwards. Connections: head to a public place and draw attention, or outrun them and pray the Audi held up. The decision was made for me when the SUV surged forward, its headlights blinding in the mirror. Hold on, I shouted, flooring the gas. The Audi roared, tires screeching as I took a sharp turn onto a side street. Noah woke with a yelp, clutching his seatbelt, but I couldn't stop to comfort him. The SUV was gaining, its engine a low growl, and I realized with sickening clarity that this wasn't about intimidation. They wanted us off the road permanently. A narrow alley loomed ahead, barely wide enough for the Audi. I yanked the wheel, scraping the side mirror against a brick wall as we shot through. The SUV hesitated, too wide to follow, and I used the moment to pull onto a main road, blending into late-night traffic. My heart hammered, my knuckles white on the wheel, but this SUV didn't reappear. Are they gone? Noah asked, his voice small. For now, I said, glancing at Ava. Her face was set, her jaw tight, but her eyes held a fire I hadn't seen. Before a mix of fear and resolve that mirrored my own, we drove in silence, the city giving way to the open highway toward Portland. The night felt alive with threats, every shadow a potential ambush, but Ava's hand on mine anchored me. My parents, James, maybe others, they'd underestimated us, thinking they could control us with fear and manipulation. But they didn't know the strength of a mother fighting for her children, or the courage of a daughter who'd seen through their lies dot as the first hints of dawn touched the horizon. I made a silent vow. Whatever it took, I'd expose their conspiracy, protect my family, and reclaim what was mine. The gala had been their opening move, but the game was far from over, and I was ready to play. The highway to Portland stretched before us like a gauntlet, the Audi's headlights slicing through the pre-dawn mist. I, Claire Reynolds, gripped the wheel, my knuckles white, every nerve screaming that we were still being hunted. Ava sat beside me, her phone's glow illuminating her tense face as she scrolled through the damning photos she'd taken from my father's office. Noah's soft snores from the back seat were a fragile anchor, a reminder of why I couldn't afford to break. The gala at the Emerald Bay Country Club only hours ago had shattered my world. Poisoned champagne, a sabotaged elevator, brake lines cut. My parents, Edward and Victoria Hamilton, and my ex-husband, James Carver, weren't just plotting to steal my shares in Pinnacle Innovations. They were trying to erase me. Mom, check. Your mirrors, Ava said, her voice low but sharp. That's Suv's bag. My heart lurched. I glanced at the rearview mirror, and there it was, a black SUV, its tinted windows like voids, trailing us at a deliberate distance, the same one that had chased us through Capitol Hill, only to vanish when I'd outmaneuvered it in that alley. Now, on this desolate stretch of I-5, it was back, a predator that had caught our scent. Don't panic, I said, more to myself than Ava. We're almost to the state line. If we can make it to Portland, Elaine will know what to do. Ava nodded, but her eyes stayed glued to the mirror. They're not giving up. Grandpa's not the type to let loose ends dangle. She was right. Edward Hamilton, tech mogul and patriarch of Pinnacle Innovations, didn't build an empire by tolerating defiance. I'd seen it in his eyes at the Gala cold, calculating, the look of a man who'd already written me off. And Victoria, with her polished smiles and cutting remarks, was his perfect partner, orchestrating their social empire with the precision of a chess grandmaster. Together, they'd decided I was a liability, a daughter who'd strayed too far from their script. Divorcing James, their handpicked heir, had been my first sin. Fighting to keep my VP role at Pinnacle was my second. Now, with Ava's evidence documents, recordings, proof of their plan to frame me for embezzlement and take custody of Noah, they were escalating. I pressed the accelerator. The Audis. Engine straining as we hit 80 miles an hour. The SUV matched our speed, closing the gap. My mind raced for options. We couldn't outrun them forever, not with a car that had already been tampered with. Calling the police was risky, Edwards. Donations to Seattle's finest were legendary, and a wrong move could land us in a precinct under his influence. But doing nothing wasn't an option either. Ava, text Elaine, I said, keeping my eyes on the road. Tell her we're being followed. Ask if she has a safe place to meet. Ava's fingers flew across her phone, her composure a stark contrast to the fear I felt clawing at my chest. At 17, she was sharper than I'd ever been at her age. Her rebellion against my parents' control now our greatest asset. She'd been the one to see through their facade, to contact my estranged Aunt Elaine, to gather evidence that could save us or doom us if it fell into the wrong hands. Done, Ava said, pocketing her phone. She says to head to a warehouse in North Portland, near the river. She'll meet us there with someone she trusts, but, Mom? She hesitated, her voice dropping. She said to ditch the car. It's probably got a tracker. A tracker. The thought hadn't occurred to me, but it made sickening sense. Edward's tech empire thrived on surveillance. Pinnacle's software powered half the city's security systems. If he'd rigged my car, he could be watching our every move. I scanned the road for an exit, spotting a rest stop a mile ahead. It was a risk, but we had no choice. Hold tight, I said, easing off the gas to avoid drawing attention. The SUV stayed close, its headlights a constant threat. As we approached the rest stop, I made a snap decision, veering onto the exit ramp without signaling. The SUV followed, but I used the moment to pull into a crowded parking lot, weaving between RVs and semis. I spotted an empty spot near a 24-hour diner, its neon sign buzzing, and parked, killing the engine. Stay low, I whispered, ducking below the dashboard. Ava and Noah crouched, Noah's eyes wide with confusion. Mom, what's happening? He asked, his voice trembling. Just a game, buddy, I lied, hating the fear in his eyes. We're hiding for a bit, then we'll go see Aunt Elaine. The SUV cruised past, slow and menacing, but didn't stop. I waited, counting seconds, until its taillights vanished around a bend. My pulse pounded in my ears, but I forced myself to move. We couldn't stay here, exposed, with a car that might betray us. Grab your stuff, I told Ava. We're walking to the diner, then we'll figure out transport. We slipped out of the Audi, Noah clutching his glow-in-the-dark keychain, Ava slinging her backpack over her shoulder. The rest stop was a blur of truckers and weary travelers, the diner's fluorescent lights a beacon in the dark. Inside, the smell of coffee and bacon grease hit me, grounding me just enough to think. I led us to a corner booth, ordering coffee. I wouldn't drink to blend in, my eyes scanning the windows for that SUV. Ava pulled out her phone, showing me more of the photos she'd taken in Edward's office. The documents were a corporate assassin's playbook, share transfer forms, with my signature forged, redirecting my 20% stake in Pinnacle to James. A custody petition claiming I was unfit due to financial recklessness. And a chilling Memo outlining a plan to neutralize Claire's influence through a fabricated embezzlement scandal. Red sticky notes in Edward's precise handwriting, marked key sections, board vote by month's end, Noah's trust fund secured, Ava to be managed. Managed? I whispered, my stomach twisting. What does that mean? Ava's face hardened. I recorded them talking about it. Listen. She played a clip, the audio faint but clear, captured during the gala's dessert course. Edward's voice, cold and authoritative, cut through the background noise. Ava's too rebellious, like Claire was before we fixed her. Boarding schools, an option, or a psych eval if she pushes back. We can't have her interfering. Victoria's voice joined in, sharp as a blade. Claire's emotional weakness is the real issue. Always has been. James, you understand what's at stake. Know us. The future, the Hamilton heir, will groom him properly. James's laugh made my skin crawl. Don't worry, Victoria. I've got the board eating out of my hand. Once we leak the fraud allegations, Claire's done. Institutionalizing her might be overkill, but I'm game if she fights. The recording ended and I sat frozen, the diner's chatter fading to a dull roar. Institutionalizing me? Sending Ava away? Grooming Noah as a puppet for their empire? The betrayal was a physical ache, a knife twisting in my chest. My parents, the people who'd raised me, who'd celebrated my promotions and toasted my wedding, were orchestrating my destruction. And James, the man I'd loved for 12 years, was their willing executioner. Ava, I said, my voice shaking, how did you stay so calm knowing this? I wasn't, she admitted, her eyes glistening. I was terrified, but I had to protect you, Mom, you and Noah. That's why I kept digging, why I reached out to Elaine. She's been through this. She knows how Grandpa operates. Elaine. Hamilton, my aunt, erased from our family narrative, was now our lifeline. Ava had told me about their months-long correspondence, how Elaine had warned her of Edward's history sabotaging family members who challenged his control, using Pinnacle's corporate might as a weapon. Elaine had been his first victim. Framed as incompetent during Pinnacle's early years, her shares stripped at a gala not unlike the one we just fled. The parallels were chilling, and I felt a surge of guilt for believing my parents' lies about her all these years. My phone buzzed, snapping me back to the present. A text from an unknown number. You can't run forever, Claire. Hand over the evidence, or Noah pays the price. My blood ran cold. I showed it to Ava, whose face paled but didn't falter. They're bluffing, she said, but her voice wavered. They need Noah for their plan, but we need to move. I nodded, my mind racing. The diner wasn't safe, not with Edwards. Reach, we needed to get to Elaine, but without a car, we were sitting ducks. I scanned the room, spotting a trucker at the counter, his keys dangling from a belt loop. A desperate idea formed: steal the keys, borrow his rig, get to Portland. But before I could act, the diner's door swung open, and two men in dark jackets stepped in, their eyes sweeping the room like hawks. Ava grabbed my hand under the table. Mom, those are the guys from the gala. I saw them with James. My pulse spiked. Hired muscle, no doubt, sent to retrieve Ava's evidence or worse. I slid a 20 onto the table, whispering, "Follow my lead." We stood, keeping Noah between us, and moved toward the back exit, blending with a group of travelers heading out. The men noticed, their strides quickening, but we slipped through the door into a service alley, the air sharp with the stench of garbage. I broke into a run, Noah's hand in mine, Ava keeping pace. The alley opened onto a gravel lot where a lone taxi idled, its driver scrolling on his phone. "Get in," I shouted, yanking open the door. We piled into the back seat, Noah whimpering, Ava slamming the door shut. "Portland now," I told the driver, tossing him a wad of cash from my purse. No questions. He raised an eyebrow but peeled out, the taxi lurching onto the highway. I glanced back, seeing the two men emerge from the alley, one raising a phone to his ear. They didn't follow, but I knew we weren't safe. Edward's web was tightening, and every move we made was a gamble. The drive to Portland was a blur of tension, Ava clutching her phone, Noah curled against me, his questions unanswered. I checked my own phone, finding another text from the unknown. Number, safe deposit box won't save you. We know where you hid it. My heart stopped. The document's physical copies Ava had printed and stashed in a safe deposit box at a Seattle bank were our leverage. How did they know? Had someone followed us? Or was there a traitor closer than we thought? Mom, Elaine's texting, Ava said, breaking the silence. She's at the warehouse with Sarah Bennett, a lawyer she trusts. Sarah's ready to file injunctions to block Grandpa's share transfer, but we need to get the evidence to her. Sarah Bennett, Elaine's contact, a corporate attorney with no ties to Pinnacle, was our best shot at fighting Edward's legal machine. But the safe deposit box was in Seattle, and going back meant walking into the lion's den. I weighed our options each, one riskier than the last, when the taxi's radio crackled with a news alert. Pinnacle Innovations VP Claire Reynolds named in fraud investigation. Sources say, board to hold emergency vote. Ava's eyes met mine, her face a mask of fury. They're moving fast, she said. The embezzlement lie is out. Pressure crushed my chest. Edward wasn't just threatening. He was executing his plan, painting me as a criminal to oust me from Pinnacle. The fraud allegations Ava's recordings confirmed were fabricated, but in Seattle's cutthroat tech world, perception was reality. By morning, my name would be plastered across tabloids. My reputation shredded. Victoria's hand was in this, no doubt her media contacts were unmatched. Her ability to spin a narrative ruthless. We need to fight back, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. But first we get to Elaine. The warehouse in North. Portland was a hulking shadow against the Willamette River, its rusted gates barely visible in the dawn light. The taxi dropped us off, the driver speeding away without a backward glance. Elaine was waiting, her silhouette sharp against the warehouse door, her gray hair pulled into a tight bun. Beside her stood a woman in her 40s, her suit crisp despite. The hour Sarah Bennett, I presumed? Claire, Elaine said, her voice warm but urgent as she pulled me into a hug. I'm so sorry it's come to this. I held her tight, guilt flooding me for the years I'd believed Edward's lies about her. Thank you, I whispered, for helping Ava, for helping us. Sarah stepped forward, her handshake firm. We don't have much time. Ava sent me some of the documents, but we need the originals. Edward's already filed a lawsuit alleging fraud, and the board's meeting tomorrow to vote you out. We can file injunctions, but we need hard evidence. I nodded, explaining the safe deposit box and the chase from Seattle. Sarah's eyes narrowed. They're desperate. That's good. It means they're scared. But we need to move fast. Inside the warehouse, a makeshift command center awaited laptops, legal pads, a whiteboard scrawled with timelines. Elaine had been preparing, her years of exile fueling a quiet resolve to dismantle Edward's empire. She recounted her story, her voice steady but laced with pain, how Edward had framed her as incompetent, forged board minutes to strip her shares, and announced it at a gala to humiliate her. He uses the same playbook, she said. Isolate, discredit, destroy. But you have something I didn't, Ava.